as you said, absolutely a passion project, and he throws himself into it. It's interesting at the beginning when you said, to play this character and the prosthetics, and he says there weren't any prosthetics, and I certainly thought there were because
there absolutely were. I was listening again, thinking I'm not quite sure. He might have thought that I was talking about the play that he's in at the moment, because he absolutely is covered in prosthetics.
Well, he looks very different to the way.
So I'm not quite sure what he meant then.
And also, he said, well, basically, it's a deathbed story about the last days, but in fact, actually, a lot of it's the last. It's the period from after coming out of jail, and of course, we get flashbacks to before, but. Largely, I mean, the clip that we heard is him arriving, and then it does cover that whole period. I thought that the thing that was striking about it was how much it manages to to juggle those two elements that you raised about how much how much do you have to make him funny, how much do you have to make him witty, and it was interesting to hear him say actually some of the stuff he wrote was great, some of it wasn't so great. And in the case of this, on the one hand, you've got this now very, very tragic figure who was once celebrated, was once embraced, was, theatrically applauded, and is now suddenly cast out. And at the very beginning, his friends are hoping that what he will have is a new birth, a new life, a new, sort of new lease of life. As far as the film is concerned, what's actually happened is that he's already broken to some extent. And, when we first meet him, his health is in ruins, his finances are in ruins, and his reputation too. And his whole life appears to be sort of fragmenting, and the way that the film represents that is a kind of collage, like between going from him in the room in which he will ultimately die, to memories that are recent memories, and then also memories which are further away. And it's quite complicated to make that structure work. And I think it does it rather well, because often when we've seen movies in which you jump around time frames, it's not the easiest thing to do. That's the first thing. The second thing is you could argue that it's the longest death scene in cinema, and certainly there is there is that sort of sense of huge impending tragedy. Also, a lot of discussion about the religion. I mean, I thought that was kind of interesting, that there is a lot of stuff about the Catholicism and about how he feels the end of his life is going to go, and how he feels about the afterlife or the existence of the afterlife or whatever.
Cue Tom Wilkinson.
Yeah, actually, done rather brilliantly. And I have to say, I thought it was a very compassionate portrait as well. I mean, I thought it was understated, and actually, oddly enough, that understatement is the thing that is its greatest strength. I think if the film has a weakness, it is that occasionally it kind of gets lost in that, because it's a portrait of those final weeks, years, which is, I mean, really, really dark, really, really difficult, absolutely, I mean, cruel in terms of what's happening to him physically and emotionally, and it doesn't shy away from that at all. And there is a sense that sometimes you can get lost in that. But what I think he manages to do, and this is largely through that device he talked about using the Happy Prince, is to put a kind of arrow through it, which is like a melancholic trajectory. So we see him with the sort of the young street kids at the very, very end of his life, and then flashing back to his separation from his family, from his wife, and you do get that sense of separation, you do get that sense of exile, you do get that sense that essentially he's been cast out of the world which he cared about, and the world which, and everything therefore has been taken away from him. I think one of the things that was odd is there are so many sort of almost fleetingly famous cameos. It's like everybody in the industry has sort of come out to take part in it. Particular plaudits, I think, to Colin Firth, who I thought was great. We heard in that clip, who I think that sense of the people that stood by him and the people that didn't stand by him. Colin Morgan, very convincingly sort of duplicitous and feckless and untrustworthy. But at the centre of it, you have Everett playing, and I know everyone said this, and I know it's a cliche, but it's true, the part he was born to play. I mean, we've seen versions of Wilde on screen before. I mean, Stephen Fry, of course, famously.
I think they said that about him too. When Stephen Fry played it, they thought this was his role.
Yes, although that's a very different film. I mean, that's got a very different trajectory to it. I mean, when I was at the Trials of Oscar Wilde, a bit of the Trials of Oscar Wilde was filmed at the school that I went to, and they used to show it in the school film society, because there's one fleeting bit when the Marquis of Queensberry, who I think was played by Patrick Troughton or somebody rushes out of his house, and the house was the headmaster's house, so we're always sort of, but anyway. So passion project by somebody stepping into a role which they are clearly designed to play, but the thing that's most impressive is that it is well directed. And it was interesting hearing him say that about standing up on the table singing "The Boy I Love Is Up in the Balcony" whilst having to shriek about being allowed to keep the extras on, because it's almost as if the performance is doing itself. It's almost as if I've got the performance. I've been leading up to this performance for all, so I can do this standing on my head. The difficult thing is everything else around it. So I liked it. I said I have some reservations about it. I think occasionally it gets lost in itself, and there are moments in it when it starts to teeter on the brink of self-indulgence. But then it pulls it back, and there's so much pain in there that you'd have to be pretty hard-hearted not to be moved and not to be angry, and there is a righteous anger in it at the injustice that has happened. And at the end, it ends, with the pardon, which was 2017. Is that right?
It was just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, which is that is astonishing, still astonishingly recent.